What's truly remarkable about Dan Wootton's wickless candle saga isn't the candle itself. It's the theatrical precision with which the narrative unfolded, as if choreographed by someone desperately searching for relevance. Wooten, the disgraced former Sun journalist whose career has become a masterclass in professional deterioration, conveniently received his faulty as-ever candle via eBay, purchased by his mysteriously unnamed fiancée as a gag gift, a detail that strains credulity when you consider his documented history of fabrication and his inexplicable obsession with the Sussexes. The wickless candle became his latest ammunition, another opportunity to perform his well-worn routine of mockery and innuendo, complete with the trademark snark of someone who trades in manufactured outrage for a living. Yet what demands scrutiny here is the timing and convenience of it all. How perfectly the story aligned with the established narrative of dismissal. How eagerly certain media outlets seized upon a potential manufacturing defect as evidence of larger incompetence. The real question isn't whether an as-ever candle arrived without a wick. Manufacturing imperfections happen in legitimate businesses. Rather, it's whether a man with Wooten's troubled past, his well-documented history of catfishing, blackmail and harassment alongside his mysteriously convenient access to damaging information, should be trusted as a credible witness to anything, let alone celebrated as a media personality worth amplifying. The as-ever candle launch and market positioning. When the Duchess of Sussex unveiled her as-ever candle collection, she entered a market segment where luxury pricing commands respect and exclusivity matters. The candles, priced at $64 each, sit comfortably within the high-end candle market where discerning consumers expect quality craftsmanship and premium ingredients to justify the investment. Rather than positioning as-ever as an accessible lifestyle brand, this price point signals serious intent in the luxury goods space, aligning with other prestigious candle makers who dominate the upper echelon of the home fragrance market. The initial offering featured two distinct scents, giving customers a choice while keeping the collection focused and curated. A classic luxury strategy that encourages consumers to sample both options and discuss their preferences, naturally generating word-of-mouth marketing among the affluent demographics most likely to appreciate such a premium product. The geographic gatekeeping of as-ever. The fundamental constraint hampering as-ever's global expansion is its current limitation to United States distribution only, a reality that has left international markets, particularly the British media, scrambling for alternative solutions. British journalists and commentators, desperate to get their hands on Meghan's products so they might critique them firsthand, have resorted to increasingly costly workarounds, purchasing through secondary markets like eBay at inflated prices just to maintain their narrative of manufactured outrage. This international demand, artificially inflated by restricted availability, has created a black market of sorts, where as-ever products command premium prices far beyond their retail value. All because a woman dared to create a lifestyle brand that isn't immediately accessible for overseas antagonists to disparage. The irony, of course, is that this scarcity only amplifies the mystique and desirability of the line, while simultaneously forcing critics to invest their own money and expose their own desperation, just to maintain their relentless campaign of dismissal. Media blind taste tests reveal quality of Meghan's products. While British media outlets have gone to extraordinary lengths to disparage the Duchess of Sussex's lifestyle ventures, their own blind taste tests have inadvertently validated the quality of her offerings. The Times' blind taste testers, conducting their evaluation without knowing the source of the product, actually praised the jam quality, a result that clearly didn't fit the predetermined narrative these outlets were hoping to construct. Similarly, both the NY Post and Telegraph enlisted blind testers to evaluate Meghan's wine, and to the apparent dismay of these publications, the testers delivered positive reviews of the product itself. It's a delicious irony, really. When stripped of the baggage of Meghan's name and face, when evaluated purely on merit rather than malice, the products speak for themselves. These blind taste tests expose the fundamental dishonesty of the Sussex-obsessed media ecosystem. They wanted to hate these products. They needed to hate them. But the moment personal prejudice was removed from the equation, quality became impossible to deny. The results stand as quiet testimony to what happens when you actually judge something on its own terms, rather than through the distorted lens of relentless antagonism. Dan Wooten's faulty product claim, former Sun journalist Dan Wooten, who has made quite the career out of criticising the Sussexes, found himself on the receiving end of what he claims was a defective as-ever candle. According to Wooten's own account, his fiancée purchased the $65 candle from eBay as a gag gift, a light-hearted jab at Meghan's lifestyle brand that took an unexpected turn when he unboxed the product only to discover it lacked a functional wick for lighting. Rather than simply accepting the faulty merchandise, Wooten seized the opportunity to broadcast his grievance across social media, framing the wickless candle as yet another example of the Duchess's supposed inability to get even the simplest details right, conveniently glossing over the rather significant fact that this was a second-hand purchase from an online marketplace rather than a direct shipment from Montecito. Dan Wooten's social media theatrics over the faulty candle. When the wickless candle arrived at his doorstep, Dan Wooten didn't miss a beat. He took to social media with characteristic flair, eager to broadcast his defective product to anyone who would listen. He posted about receiving an as-ever candle without a wick, framing the entire affair as a humorous gift from his fiancée, who had supposedly purchased it second-hand on eBay as a joke. But Wooten being Wooten, he couldn't resist adding his own embellishment to the narrative, deploying a Markled quip, a clever play on words suggesting that he, too, had fallen victim to some Meghan-related mishap. The joke, such as it was, played into the exact narrative that certain corners of the British media had been desperately seeking. Another supposed failure, another crack in the facade of the Duchess's carefully constructed empire. Never mind that by his own account this was a second-hand purchase from eBay, a detail that conveniently got lost in the gleeful amplification across social platforms, where the distinction between deliberate delivery and random marketplace transaction hardly seemed to matter in the rush to generate outrage and engagement. The symbolic power of a faulty product. The media's coverage of the wickless candle incident reveals far less about the actual product malfunction than it does about the predetermined narrative they've constructed around Meghan's brand. One where the symbolic collision between her carefully curated domestic fantasy and the suggestion that everything she touches becomes either absurdly overhyped or fundamentally flawed takes precedence over factual accuracy. The distinction between what actually happened, a second-hand purchase made by Wooten's fiancée on eBay, a resale platform entirely outside Meghan's control, and the manufactured narrative of direct shipment becomes almost irrelevant in the funhouse logic of Sussex discourse, where the media deliberately blurs the lines between reality and innuendo to create a more salacious story. By framing the incident as though Meghan personally sent a defective candle to her number one antagonist, Outlets transform a random product malfunction into evidence that the Duchess's entire enterprise is riddled with incompetence, or worse. A symbolic representation designed to reinforce the pre-existing bias that nothing bearing her name can succeed without becoming a punchline, that her very touch corrupts the ordinary into the ridiculous. Dan Wooten's background and the architecture of his following. Dan Wooten is a former journalist who built his considerable platform, particularly on YouTube and Substack, through relentless and often scathing commentary about the Sussexes, a trajectory that conveniently obscures the more troubling aspects of his professional history. While he's celebrated in certain tabloid circles for breaking the Megxit story in 2019, what's frequently glossed over is that Wooten has been previously fired from positions due to serious allegations including catfishing, blackmail, fraud and harassment, the kind of career-ending behaviour that would typically consign someone to obscurity rather than elevate them to media antagonist status. Yet here he is, cultivating a devoted following by positioning himself as Meghan's most vocal critic, a role that seems to feed something in him that conventional employment never could. His entire persona has been constructed on the scaffolding of Sussex controversy, each inflammatory post and video designed to cement his relevance in a media ecosystem that rewards outrage above all else. The irony, of course, is that Wooten doesn't appear to be a truth-teller, fearlessly exposing hypocrisy. He appears to be someone who found in the Sussex narrative a vehicle for his own rehabilitation, a way to rebrand himself as something other than what his actual track record suggests. A man with a documented history of the very behaviours he claims to oppose. The murky truth behind the wickless candle narrative. Yet what remains conspicuously absent from this gleeful coverage is any genuine interrogation of how, precisely, a wickless candle found its way into Dan Wooten's hands in the first place. The actual source and authenticity of this allegedly defective product remain decidedly unclear. Wooten himself claims his fiancée purchased it second-hand on eBay, a detail that conveniently deflects from the more troubling question of whether this entire saga was orchestrated for maximum media impact. The proximity between Wooten and various royal courtiers, particularly those in Prince William's orbit, coupled with the suspiciously theatrical timing of this discovery, suggests a far more coordinated effort than a simple unfortunate candle mishap. What we're witnessing, in essence, is a carefully constructed narrative designed to serve a singular purpose: to fuel yet another round of relentless media criticism of the Duchess, transforming a potential manufacturing issue into fodder for the same recycled commentary about her supposed failures and pretensions. The distinction between fact and fabrication has become, as it so often does in Sussex discourse, entirely irrelevant to those invested in perpetuating the story.